Welcome back, everyone. This is Jack Greenstock, your host of Growing with My Fellow Growers, here with an amazing panel and a few special guests this evening. I'll start off first by passing it to Spartan Grown. Welcome back.
Thanks, Jack. Welcome back to you too. The Spartan Grown, you can find me on Instagram, just Instagram. I've been getting constant messages from lots of pretenders on Facebook and other media. So just Instagram, Spartan Grown, all one word. And then also, if you don't have an Instagram, you can always shoot me an email, spartangrown@gmail.com. And that's how you get a hold of me. I have experience of both organic and synthetic growing, so I can help on either side.
Happy to have you back, and I'm also happy to be back. Missed out the last couple weeks for various reasons, but it's always good to be here with this awesome crew. Next up, Dr. MJ.
Hey guys, yeah, I've been gone a couple of weeks too, so it's nice to be back. I missed you guys, missed the audience, missed the chatters, missed all the panelists. So it's nice to be back doing the show again. I'm Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. Grow love, everyone.
I think you're definitely going to get some in on some of these conversations tonight. We're going to be talking a little bit about light schedule, lighting related things as well. And Matthew's got some information about light in particular that we brought up. And we're like, oh, this would be great if Dr. MJ was here. So we're going to get back to that at some point. And speaking of Matthew, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates. I'm an integrated pest management specialist. And I am excited to talk here today with our two panel guests. And I am excited to talk about various aspects of lighting and with regards to plants, photosynthesis and all that sort of thing. If you're interested in pest information, integrated pest management strategies, things like that, you can find me in a couple of different places. Twitter and Instagram at SyncAngel, where I regularly share research reports and things of that ilk. And also on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, which I'm also commenting on here in the chat, where I post a lot of my pest primer videos and educational footage.
Happy to have you back as well. Next up, Noah V. Grower.
Yeah, hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Noah V. Grower on Instagram with 2 E's. You can find me there. And most weeks here with everybody else. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Doing good, doing good. Next up, Kyle Breeder.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm Kyle Breeder. I'm a cannabis breeder that typically specializes in feminized breeding, but I'm also stepping into the reg world, male and female. I'm also a genetic consultant. So if that's something you're looking into, I do have intellectual property that would help you in that area. And for anybody that lives in Michigan, my flower is being my breeder cuts are being cultivated there. So there's going to be access there for anybody that lives there, and hopefully maybe other places soon. And if you're looking for seeds, I have a website, purebreeding.com, and you can find me on pure_breeding on Instagram, pure breeding on Facebook, and pure_breeding on Twitter. I just got on Twitter now that Musk has control of it. And yeah, happy to be here. I'm glad everyone's still here and safe. And thanks for hosting, Jack.
Hopefully free speech on Twitter means cannabis won't be censored. With that said, the American one.
Hello, Jack, and everyone here on the panel and everyone in chat. It's always good to be here and see everybody. I'm the American one on the YouTube, and the American one _with_A Keens on the IG. Most of you know me already. But if you don't, search for me on IG, type in the American one, and hopefully a little guy with an American top hat will pop up, taking a chunk bite out of the world. That would be me. And yeah, it's good to be here. And yeah, it's good to have some new boxes on the panel.
We got one fellow from across the pond at least, and I used to always think his name was Percy because he worked with Percy's Grow Room, the website. But I found out later that Percy meant personal, like a personal grow or personal stash. So without further ado, one of our first special guests this week, Macky. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody from the UK here. It's not really my voice, so I'm sorry I was faking that. But shit. Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack. It's sweet to be back. I mean, I've been on this podcast a couple of years ago. It was a long, long time ago since I was last on the Cheap Home Grow show, man. So thanks for having me back. And it's a pleasure to see you all again. Like Spartan, I haven't spoke to you for a long time, and I hope life is treating you good. And then we had Jack on the show just a couple of weeks ago. Kyle Breeder was on the show recently as well, and Matthew Gates. We've got interviews coming out with all you guys pretty soon. So thanks for joining us on our show as well. That's pretty sweet. It's always good.
That's what it's all about. I mean, I love this community and being able to go on each other's shows and interact with the different communities and things like that. And you guys even had a little stint here on the Cheap Home Grow channel called Growing with My Fellow Lads.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, they had a
That's right,
takeover.
yeah.
That spawned, just like this show has, many other shows. Like I think this kind of created or drifted into the Michigan Bros Grow Show. It also turned from Growing with My Fellow Lads to Percy's Grow Room has the High on Homegrown, and there's also the other British group. I'm trying to blanking on their names, but
Room 420, man.
yeah, Grow Room 424. GMO. So there's a lot of stuff has actually spawned from this channel, which makes me happy to see because we need more content like that out there. And it's amazing to have this community keep growing, people sharing the good information and connecting over this amazing plant. But last and certainly not least, we've got Monkey.
Well, not a whole lot of introduction to be done. Mackie's pretty much done most of it for me right there. Just a home grower, cocoa grower that admin over at Percy's that we decided to start a podcast. So Mackie and I went on a limb and we started High on Homegrown a couple of years ago, and we met a lot of fantastic people.
A couple of years ago and shit. Has it been that long? God damn.
Almost 2 years now, man. It's getting close. So yeah, you never know what's going to happen. You stake your claim and you start talking and people start listening. It's been a good ride.
You just keep going. We just passed 3 years a little bit ago, and I don't see any signs of stopping. Even when we missed 1 week, but for the most part, we come here every week and are able to make it happen. So
yeah, good
definitely excited to have everybody here.
Excellent people.
Well, we're happy to have you. And this week, there's been some conversations going on in the community recently, and I know we've talked about this a little bit in the past, discussing light cycles. And something that's been re-brought up a little bit is the 12 on, 1 off, sometimes known as gas lantern routine or gaslight or whatever you want to call it, gas lamp ratio or whatever it is. People are reintroducing that back into the scene. There's a guy named Joe P who's really pushing hard for it. And there's people that are pushing for it in greenhouses and things like that. I have some questions and thoughts of my own about doing it indoors. But I think when examining that, I think it's also fun to maybe potentially examine all the possible light cycles. Like in veg, some people run 24 hours on, 0 off. Some people run 20 on, 4 off. Then there's 18.6, then there's 17.7 and 16.8, whatever. So I'm just curious going around the panel, I guess maybe in the same little circle that we did for our introductions, just like Spartan, what do you do for your veg? What is your light cycle? And do you have any reasoning behind it?
Yeah, 18 hours because it's easy. It's worked for me all my growing life. And until I see evidence to where it's a detriment, like it's costing me money if I don't do it another way, or, I'm open to options, but I'll wait till a couple of people do it before I risk my garden on it. And when I know something works. So that's why I'm at 18.
And I'm with you on that. I mean, it works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And do you know any ideas of like your PPFD or your PAR?
I haven't measured veg. I just go by the plant. And if they are showing light stress, I crank my lights down. I've got the Grandmaster level 6 bar, the V6, I think it's called, but I have it at 40%. I put it in there at 100%, and within an hour, I was in there turning it down. And so I just I should do it though, because I have a Pulse Pro I can bring in there and get the measurement from. I just haven't. I need to do that. But I've got it turned down to 40%, and that's what this plant seemed to like, and that's why I've got it set there. But no, I haven't even measured it. I measured the PPF in the flower room, of course. That's at 1,000. That's what I run in there.
Okay, and yeah, it's definitely interesting when you know the exact amount and then how long the light's on for, because then you can actually calculate the DLI or daily light integral.
Right.
And I know not a lot of people are thinking about it so much in veg, but I've seen time-lapse video where people's plants kind of go up and down kind of throughout the day. Then at a certain point, it could be they're drought stressed, or it could be that they've got too much light, but they just completely flop. Like they're completely moving away from the light. And to me, I think it might be a photo response of like, hey, we've gotten enough light, but I know Dr. MJ and many others might disagree with that. So I'd like to pass it over to Doc and maybe hear what is your veg cycle, and if you know what your PPFD is in veg, why do you run a particular level and for how long?
Yeah, usually, when plants are first, they grow from a seed. So I keep them under 24-hour lighting for the first about a week usually. So as they're pushing up out of the Jiffy pellets where I start them, until they're kind of clearly definable plants, past their first node. And then I'll go to 20 on usually and 4 off for the rest of veg. PPFD, I start seedlings at about 200 by veg. So by the time I transplant the plant up, pot it up into its second container, that's usually after it has at least 3 nodes. I'll have them up above 500. And that's enough usually for veg. I'll usually run them a little bit higher than that, like bring the light up to like 700-800 during veg, and then max out at 1,000 during flower. But yeah, usually 20 hours or 18, but 20 hours on is pretty typical for my grows, if I'm being honest.
Do you know, and maybe you could pull up a PPFD, or not a PPFD, a DLI calculator. Do you have any idea like the range that your DLI would fall in for veg and for flower with those PPFDs and times?
No, I don't pay really any attention to DLI. I mean, we can calculate it if we want to. But no, there's always some sort of, you're right in thinking that it's, the combination of the amount of time that it's on plus the density. PPFD is the density per second, and DLI is essentially that per 24 hours. And so it matters how long you're running the lights, but it's not a strict ratio between DLI and growth. So I guess I'd need to know why we wanted to measure DLI.
The main thing for me would be like not related to plants at all, but like pests. But I'm of course a special case there. There's a bunch of other things.
Okay, if there's a pest that's sensitive to a particular DLI.
Sure. Oh no, it's just like a developable. But like you say, it's a metric for like a longer period of time, not like a second, like PPFD before 24-hour span. So like that's just a developmental time. So like over a larger stretch of time. And there's other reasons to use it, of course, right? I actually think that you probably know better than I do about that. But for me, DLI, I don't really usually think too much about it myself. Doesn't mean there isn't some benefit to it though. But for me, I usually equate it to like environmental things I'm tracking outside of the cultivation itself.
Right.
I like to think about it just because anything that can be tracked can be improved. And if you start noticing trends of like a certain DLI is maybe too high and the plants aren't performing as well, you're getting lower yield, or at a certain DLI, you're hitting your best yields and things like that. I think that there's something it's worth tracking. I mean, we're running light for.
Yes. I just think that each of those variables are more important than the combination. This is my same problem with VPD. I don't really like to track VPD, and everybody learns about VPD and they think it's like the next greatest thing, but it's actually combining 2 different variables that are each independently important and need to be thought of sort of in their own right. And combining them is illuminating in some ways, but it's not more important than the underlying variables themselves. So with VPD, temperature and relative humidity are both important in their own right, regardless of VPD. And with DLI, PPFD and day length are both important for their own sets of reasons that, if we're running controlled experiments and we wanted to see sort of what the ratio was, we would want to measure DLI and compare those things. But even then, we wouldn't want to just be changing DLI. Like if we were running a controlled experiment, right, we would change either PPFD or length of lighting. We wouldn't just sort of change both of them willy-nilly because the VPD was a little bit different. We'd want to control each one of those variables independently. So DLI is always only going to be sort of descriptive in certain ways. And for plants, at least, it is not prescriptive. There isn't sort of a prescribed DLI that the plants will do best with. They will respond differently to different PPFDs and to different day lengths, each for independent reasons. And you could sum those and say, well, this is the DLI they work best with, but it wouldn't, you could reach that same DLI at a different day length with more density, or a longer day length with less density. And neither one of those would necessarily produce the same good growth that you witnessed. So I think it's important to pay attention to those underlying variables.
Sort of an abstraction.
Yeah.
One metric of many to keep an eye on, I guess. I don't think it's like the main thing, but like you were saying, you could adjust like your intensity or the day length time. The two examples you gave, just for veg, like 500 ppfd at 20 hours was about 34, and the 1000 for 12 hours was 43. And I've seen like some stuff like Chandra et al. Experimented with as high as like 60 DLI, which I think like they went up as high as like 2000 ppfd with 800 parts per million CO2. And some plants were able to like get a tiny thing, but it was diminishing returns. But then other ones had a drop down. So they got too much light and it actually hurt their yield, or, didn't improve it compared to 1500, which they found to be sort of like the optimal with 800 CO2. But if you have atmospheric CO2, that 400 parts per million CO2, 1000 was sort of that threshold. And if you went to the 1500 again, you started to see stuff drop down.
Well, it's sort of the secondary analysis too. It's the marginal returns that are more important on these things, because you can keep investing more energy in light and sort of incrementally increase yield, but it becomes really inefficient at the top because you have to add like a lot more energy for that last gram, compared to earlier, where like each new unit of energy got you like 20 grams done at about 500 ppfd. It just, you get less and less. So it becomes not profitable to think about it in an economic sense to reach sort of the absolute limits in those. But yeah, that sounds about right.
So as a summary, I just want to touch back with Spartan and you guys are both under LED lights. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
And then next up, we've got Noah the Grower, who I believe is under HPS. And Noah, what is your light cycle for veg and for flower?
I'm really close to what Doc does. Sometimes I do a little bit more, sometimes I do a little bit less, but I'm probably right around 24. And then my flower room is exclusively 12-12. I've known people that do 13-11. But 12-12 has always been the sweet spot for me. And like Spartan said, I'm not going to change it because it's been so kind to me over the years. So I'm not changing anything. Been doing it for a long time that way. So
I think that's smart, honestly. I mean, I really like the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if you're having success, there's a pretty large amount of risk to drastically change to a new system entirely, especially if you're talking about like light, which is one of the most important aspects of the grow. Photosynthesis, it's talking about light. So if you're changing the amount of light that you're giving, you can change the amount of photosynthesis that can happen in that daytime. And that's going to change how much yield and growth is able to occur and all that other stuff. So it's definitely an interesting topic. So I'm glad that everybody started getting to weigh in. And I believe next up would be Kyle.
So I definitely push the same thing that Doc and Noah do. I feel like it just gives it a little more oomph in regards of speed. But when I transition in the flower, and only because I'm in like confined heights, so I'm limited in regards of space, in regards of height, I kind of do the exact opposite of what I'm doing in veg for probably like 4 or 5 days. So I'll do 4 on and like 20 off. Which seems probably cuckoo to some people, but I've just noticed I just have less stretch when I do that. It's just something I've been kind of playing around with, and I've just seen results for what I'm doing. But after that, I go directly back to 12 and 12. So
you used to mess around with like a 2 or 3 day dark period to transition, right? And you said that would also help reduce the stretch. Is there a reason you switched off of doing that? And what are the changes you've noticed?
Yeah, so I did that with Princess Elsa, and I did a side-by-side comparison because I thought it was all kind of fake, so I had one tent that was just regular 12 and 12, and then I did a 3-day, I think it was either 2 or 3 full days of dark, and one literally got tall and stretched, and the other one literally stayed short and squat. And I was like, wow, okay, I guess the guy wasn't a weirdo, because it actually worked. And then I tried it on some land race, and they all died. I'm not sure, just because they weren't as adaptable. I'm not sure the truth theory behind all that, of why, because I did it to the tie I had, and the tie was already kind of really not happy being indoors under artificial lighting anyways. And then I just didn't proceed with further testing. I just kind of went back to whatever I was doing. But it is something that I am still interested in and should probably still play around with at some point. But
Is that
yeah.
4 hour first few days while you transition sort of a half measure to between going complete darkness and like going straight to 12-12? It kind of gives a little bit of light. So if you had something like the tie, it's not just going to die because it at least has 4 hours of light before you flip to 12.
Yeah, I've just noticed like the most recent one, like they were super tall, and I hadn't flipped them yet. I'm like, Jesus, like what am I going to do? So I was like, well, maybe I can play around with the lighting schedule. So yeah, I just basically put it on, instead of going directly 12 and 12. I just gave them just a little bit of light, just so they wouldn't die, right? Just so they had some energy, and then just put them in pure dark. And I did notice they really didn't stretch at all, man. And I really didn't have much room in that tent, and they finished pretty well. So I guess just it worked for me on that run, and I might be kind of sticking with that. I can't sit here and say 100%
How
like
long
that.
did you run that cycle for? Just till stretch was over, and then?
Yeah, I did it for like a
12?
week. I
Oh,
did it
just
like
a
for like a
week.
week. Yeah, and I only have my all my breeding tents are like 6'6", and they were already at like, I don't know, 4 feet or something. So
Oh, man.
yeah, so I was like in a crisis mode. So I was like, I got to try something, and they finished really, really well. I mean, they weren't even jamming into the lights or nothing. So I think there's kind of something with that. I don't know if
That's
Yeah,
fucking
you're
cool.
probably stunting them to some extent.
Yeah.
I mean, I
for
don't
sure.
doubt that starving the plants from light will get them to grow less. But I do. I mean, we've had this conversation, I think, before, but I wonder why that's
Yeah.
the goal. Like, we want our plants to grow a lot. But I just want to add, darkness is definitely stressful for plants. So if you're looking to reduce the stress, putting them into extended darkness like that is going to stress them out. Now, I know that you like to sort of stress your plants out also, and make sure that they're going to be solid genetically in that way. But generally, yeah, I do the exact opposite in terms of going into the flip. I walk them gradually and extend the darkness gradually day by day. And cognizant that plants will just kind of freak out if they're suddenly plunged into darkness that they're not expecting to.
If it's not an extended darkness, like how we would have in a veg, whether it's 20 on, 4 off, 18-6, 17-7, whatever, are there benefits happening at the dark, or is it always going to be stressful as soon as that light kicks off? Like, 'cause I feel like it translocates
stressful
nutrients
for the
and water. And
a good way to think about this is plants are evolved to survive darkness. So they're not making new energy for themselves. They need to rely on stored energy to power life during the dark period. And they store energy for that purpose. And we've had several studies that show by the end of what the plant expects to be the dark period, they've used 95% of that energy. So they're running on fumes. And if the sun doesn't come out again or the lights don't turn on again, they have to go into sort of crisis mode, and they have to start allocating energy that wasn't initially allocated for basic sort of life support functions. The longer you leave them in that state, sort of the more it will affect their growth. And I think that's some of what Kyle observed with them, not growing much after having gone through that. But yeah, the plants basically, they get into a rhythm and they know how long the dark period is going to be, and they plan for it. They store this energy for it. And if you go extending that too long, it leaves them sort of without energy to live, and they have to respond.
or die in some cases, which if you leave them in the dark too long,
Yeah,
they'll
which
literally kill
apparently you've
themselves.
seen. Right, exactly.
Yeah, and like I really like how you put that, Dr. MJ, because that's kind of the same way that we look at like that immune system profile, that plants have when they are reacting to like detections of pests and that sort of a thing. They have like stored energy. Hey, a lot of it, like we've talked about many times, goes into the soil, goes into the root zone as a sink, goes into fruits, right? If they're making fruits. And then of course in the roots there it has an effect on like the microbiome and the rhizosphere and that sort of a thing. But also like when they get attacked by something or they perceive something as a threat, they have a totally a growth response. But if they're already stressed in one direction, maybe they're not very hydrated, they're desiccated, it's very dry out, maybe the sun is very relentless, all these other kinds of things can be happening at the same time. So plants have had to evolve, like you said, sort of survive these things that happen. And just because they survive it doesn't mean that they're like, doing amazingly well.
Surviving is
what
not
I
the same
mean?
as thriving.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's like a lot of drought tolerant plants. It's like the plant would probably be a hell of a lot happier if it got plenty of water and would grow a lot bigger, but it will survive, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like you don't ever see feral hemp growing in a dry field that's like out yielding somebody who's commercially cultivating crops in like greenhouses. If you look at like grams per square foot or whatever, and that's
Right.
for a reason.
I mean, heck, even in like, as I understand it, a lot of the like non-cultivated, whether it's feral or technically actually wild, I think there's a debate about that I'm not super qualified to talk about. I just read the research reports. But in those states, when they're not being like domesticated and cultivated intensely, like they don't even make the cannabinoids and terpenes to the levels that we would enjoy. So like in that way, it's all kind of artificial. Not
Yeah,
to,
people
like,
get headaches from smoking it. The ditchweed, it's like can't get you high for the most part. But the American one, we've gone around and a few of us have shared our light cycles, and I'm curious to hear what do you do for lighting? As far as actually, Kyle, one thing I didn't touch on was what type of lighting are you using? LEDs or something else?
Yeah, I just have some. I mean, Dr. MJ might be mad, but I have just like some. Not mad, but I just have some like nothing that good in any of my tents. Just stuff that just basically gets the job done. I mean, if I was like cultivating for flower, and I'm sure it does matter too, maybe for breeding. I'm sure there's probably stuff that might be beneficial. I'm not too sure, but I just have stuff that just gets the job done. But LEDs.
Is the nervousness that you're using blurples and you don't want to talk about it?
Oh no, but I like blurples. I mean, they work well. The only reason why I probably don't use those is A, I mean, they're kind of somewhat outdated, but B, they take horrible pictures. So
yeah, and stuff on your eyes.
That's a
too,
good point,
and hard to
actually.
detect plant pests problems or even nutrient deficiencies and things like that.
I've had good results with that shit, man. I mean, it wasn't even that long ago. I had like one set left, and I was still using them because it was decent. I don't know.
I've seen people kill it under them.
Judgment free, Kyle. I'm not gonna harangue you about the type of light that you got. That's fine.
I know.
Better than dumping it in a landfill, right?
It's really about PPFD, guys. It's not about whether they're blurple or not. The problem with a lot of the blurples was that they just lied about how much light
exactly
put out, and they're not very efficient. But the quality of light, like Kyle says, is terrible for pictures, but the plants do fine under it if you have enough of it.
You mean my 10,000 watt Amazon LED that actually draws 100?
Right.
The same as 1,000 watt HPSs. I've been fooled.
Exactly. No, you've been fooled. Yeah, God. It's got
I don't miss
a
that
lot
marketing.
better. But and I think new growers think that we're just sort of making this up. That like, no, that's really how like all LEDs used to be sold, which is like ridiculous claims like that.
Yeah, everything's 1,000 watt, 2,000 watt, 1,000 watt.
Yeah, like a stupid little 100-watt light that they're advertising as a replacement for a 1,000-watt double-ended. And the problem there was a lot of growers believed it and sort of were way underlit for their space. And that's where a lot of our kind of cut our teeth too in certain senses, especially with LEDs. And that's where a lot of the ideas about more light is always better. Because everybody didn't have enough.
This is just a really funny example of what you're talking about, with people not knowing better or like just believing that they were what they were. I had a friend of mine. They got a little 18650 lithium ion battery, and don't worry, I'm going somewhere with this. Basically, they were very curious why it wasn't working, and they knew that they'd asked for a system like these are like the batteries you use to like power like a vape mod or something like that. And I took a look at it, and it says, and I actually have it with me here, it's 9,900 milliamp hours. And there's no way in heck that this small battery has this capacity. It just doesn't exist on the market. But they were swindled because I mean I'm reading it right now on the battery. It all looks very official. Plugs into its thing, doesn't work at all, and it's because it doesn't even get close to what a normal battery of its type would have, and that just exists out there. And I don't know, I should bring it to like training workshops and stuff more to like drive home this point that like, you know, if you don't ask for data, if you're not looking, there are definitely absolutely products out there that look fine and they don't work. So I really appreciate that. That's
yeah, that sounds like an actual scam though, right? Like they're
oh yeah, this is an actual scam.
right.
That was, some people may argue that was happening with lighting, companies claiming higher than their actual efficiencies and then putting out lights with lower than that efficiencies. I think it's funny that Mars, who actually was one of the bigger offenders of this early on, has since become better and honest about what the wattage is actually drawing from the wall. But you still have a little carryover in the names. It's like the TS3000 and it pulls 300 watts. So at least they tell you now, and at least they give you the diodes and the drivers and all that other information. So, but you do definitely see some of that.
Dude, they have so many reps at this point, like everywhere. It's like crazy how many reps they are, people that try and, you know, hey, I don't know.
I said no to like 15 of them, but the American one, you've been waiting patiently over there, and we've got a few guests that I want to get to as well about their lighting situations. So, Tao, what is your veg and flower routines, and what kind of lights do you use?
I've been using incandescent bulbs and candlelight for the past couple weeks now.
That don't work. I've tried it.
Dr. MJ said he wouldn't judge, so I figured I'd throw that out.
That's awesome, man. I love it.
You just got him on that one.
I love it. Candlelight. That's my favorite answer. That's my favorite answer.
I put the aluminum foil on the ceiling so the light comes
I got a bunch of
down.
fireflies and I put them in a bag and I hung it over the plants.
All right, so yeah, but no, basically I have all LEDs in my veg spaces except for one CMH. I mean, just a regular metal halide, a little one, and I'm still using HPS for flower, but I use 18 and 6 veg for during the summer, and then I go to 20 and 4 off for the winter. I believe that there's something about the 4 off. I mean, plants always get a little sleep in, and yeah, I think they deserve it, even if they were Alaskan natives, which get 24 hours sometimes. Yeah, so 24. And I was just going to mention, like Dr. MJ is saying, the VPD isn't that really useful of a tool, but if you have all your cooling maxed out and the temperature, you as much as you can do, you get it down to 85, then you want to know where you would want that humidity a little, right? So at least it's useful a little bit if you can't control one or you max out at one. So yeah, I just want to throw that out.
I agree with that. I just think that both temperature and humidity are independently more important than VPD. But if you're up against the wall, knowledge is power. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a question for, I guess, everybody. Is there still a debate whether using HPS, which in theory yields better, but yet you're pumping out cost to cool that room versus just going LED and not having? I mean, is there like a whole? Is there an answer between those two styles?
Most HPS does not yield better.
It doesn't yield better.
Okay.
Per watt. Yeah, it depends on, I mean, some of the really high-end HPS are over 2 micromoles per joule, and that's better than some lower-end LEDs. But for the most part, the modern LEDs, like the Grandmaster levels LEDs were mentioned earlier, and I'll actually even just quote some from like Geek Beast that Dr. MJ has tested. I've seen the PPFD readings. I've seen the tests be done, and they're a significant amount more efficient as far as putting out PPFD within the PAR range, the 400 to 700 range. And there's even a little bit of the EPAR, the extended PAR range, or biologically plant active radiation, and some call it BPAR. And those, even with white full spectrum lights, you're getting small chunks of that on either end, the blues and the reds. So
those are different, you know that, Jack, right? EPAR and PBAR.
Yeah, they're a slightly different range, right? The
Yeah, but they're measured. Well, EPAR is for photosynthesis specifically, and PBAR, plant biologically active radiation, is really thinking about the non-photosynthetic reactions that plants have to light, usually outside of the PAR wavelengths, but not entirely. They have some non-photosynthetic reactions to light within the PAR wavelengths as well.
Like some of the blues are similar to the responses that they get from some of the UVs, like 440 nanometer blue is similar to some of the lower intensity UVs, like UVA, I believe.
Right. Yeah.
And
But
those
it's just
responses
whether
are
you're
like-
paying attention to it for photosynthesis or for other sort of reactions that the plant can have.
I think it's more for the reactions, like you're trying to get a certain stress response to
Right.
like increased terpene or cannabinoid production, or anthocyanin production were the two. Anthocyanin and terpenes were the ones that I saw examined with the blue lighting. But there's still a lot of research to be done.
Blue and
And-
UV, right? For
Yeah, as
Yeah.
well. But the bug bee has been pretty outspoken against UV, saying that all the research that he's done, and they've tried to like give it a ton, try to give it a little, all the research that they've tried to do with UV, they haven't been able to find positive benefits for terpene or cannabinoid production in their labs. That's not to say that it's not possible to
I
get
agree.
UV benefits.
Yeah,
but-
no, I've said that before too. I think until we get sort of better research that shows that it does something, people ask me like, how much UV do I need? I'm like, none, as far as we can tell. Like there's no good science to rely on for using UV to like spike cannabinoid production, using it during flowering when a lot of growers think that there is.
Right. And who knows what else in the sun's spectrum might be benefiting that is not in the grow light that people are maybe missing or trying to search for and add in there. But I'll pass it to Macky first and ask, what kind of grow lights do you use and what's your preferred veg and flower cycle?
I like to keep it simple, man. I just have, I have two grow tents. I have two 4x4s. One of them is my flower tent, and that's got a light from Invisible Sun called the Ish 530 BR. It's got some blue and red in there. It's real nice light, quality light. And in my other tent, which is more like a veg tent, and I grow my autos in there too, that's got a Mars Hydro TS 2000. And I just like to keep things simple, man, as simple as possible, because it's just easier to run things that way. And I'll grow auto flowering plants and I'll grow photo period plants as well. So I'll veg 8 in one of the tents, like at the same time, 4 photos, 4 autos. And then when the plants get bigger, the photos get moved over into the flowering tent under the Ish 530. And the auto flowers stay underneath the TS 2000 and remain the rest of their life out there on 18.6. And the flowering tent is obviously on 12.12. And you just keep it simple like that, and you can keep a good run just going over and over. I like to keep it as simple as possible because it's simple that way, isn't it? It's less likely you're going to fuck things up.
It's nice when you've got a system. My dad used to always say the system is the solution. So if you can make a system for something, that's the solution to your problem, right? You've got your autos. Spartan Growing, I believe, also does the auto flowers in the veg tent. And if you could get yourself some flower out of your veg space, then hell yeah. Some people like to hate on autos, but I think that there's definitely a use case for them, that maybe being it right there, or interplanting between photo periods and greenhouses and outdoor settings where you get a crop, a bumper crop, some call it.
They're
early.
cannabis plants, aren't they? It doesn't matter what they are, as long as they produce some good buds. It's all good.
Yeah, there's
Cannabis
cannabinoids,
plants.
terpenes, and medicine in there for the people, and it can come at
Grow
a
some
relatively-
autos, everybody.
Yep, there's been a lot of hate definitely flying around still to this day, and I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
probably less
But
deserving.
they did used to be terrible, though. I mentioned this the other day a couple of weeks ago on our show, how 10 years ago I grew some, it was called Sweet Mango. And it was an auto flower, but it was just dreadful. It turned out absolutely shocking. And you can see if people were growing back then, back in the day when autos were bad, you can see why they can be deterred from growing them again. But if you try them nowadays, the photo period plants and the auto plants are hard to tell the difference from when you come to the final product. It's just if you want to grow big monster bushes, then you can grow photo period and veg them for a while. But if you want something done quick, which would still be high quality, autos are perfect, man. It's 18.6 the whole way, and you'll be good.
Breeder definitely matters there as well, because I know that there's some breeders that are a lot further along. I know Mephistos Genetics is a popular one. Mandalorian previously, now Gnome Automatics is popular. Night Owl Seeds. I know 2020 Mendocino's been crushing it. Humboldt Seed Company and Humboldt Seed Organization both have put out some respectable autos that I've been able
Dutch
to
Passion,
smoke and
man.
enjoy.
Dutch Passion. Yeah, they have a strain called Auto Colorado cookies, and that's the shit, man. It takes 100 days from start to finish, and you're left with 4 or 5 ounces of high quality buds, man.
One of
Good
them did a
genes.
study, I think it might have been Dutch Passion, and they claim that 20 on, 4 off was their most successful. But I really think that comes down to not only the intensity and duration, but also the spectrum.
A lot of things go into it. You know, it's cannabis growing is more like an art form rather than a science because so many people do so many things.
There's
a
that,
different
I think
way.
it's called Lieberg's law of minimums, though. There's like the bucket and there's all the little slats, and like one slat might be CO2, one is nitrogen, one is phosphorus, one is potassium, one is whatever. And then whatever that minimum one, that's like only how high your buckets can be filled to. So like if your light is only at, let's say 300 ppfd, even if you've got the perfect nutrients, even if you've got the perfect airflow, perfect everything else,
Yeah, for sure.
you're just not running enough light, you're not going to get as much yield as you might be able to as if you increase that one minimum, I guess.
I'd say light is
input.
definitely the most important factor. Yeah, having a good grow light. And I agree. I'm sure many of the people on the panel here agree that LED has exceeded how good HPS is. I mean, 10 years ago, it was different. HPS was still king, but now you can get LED lights that not blow HPS out the water, but for their efficiency and the light spectrum that they give to plants. It's just, you can't
even once they hit the same, like let's say it was 2 micromoles per joule or ppfd per watt, whatever you want to call it, 2.0. And that'd be like the high end for most HPS, like double-ended, like the better stuff. Single-ended is like 1.3 to 1.7, and like MyGrow and Dr. MGS testings from what I've seen. But
it depends.
Even if when they're the same, there's no bulb replacement with LED, and the bulbs that have mercury in them, not everybody's disposing of them properly. And even if you try to dispose of it properly, you're kind of hoping that the people at the facilities are taking care of all that appropriately. Where an LED, you could give it to a friend, you could make it your veg light after a while. You could, I mean, use it for a few years before you have to get rid of it or throw it out. So that environmentally just makes it more sound.
Somebody mentioned there in the chat, the Holzberg said 315 or 630 CMH. The CMH, man, that's some high quality lighting.
I love them. I used to grow with CMH. A little bit too much heat for my space and too much power for my space, but they rock. Plants seem really happy under them. And unlike an LED, which has like kind of a narrow band in that 400 to 700, HID bulbs, whether it's HPS, they have stuff in like the IR, like heat radiation, like above 800 nanometers, which is like not even visible light. It's just like a heat lamp would be at a restaurant to keep food warm. And then the CMH has less of that, but it also has some of the small spikes of UVs and things outside of the 400 to 700 spectrum.
Love that shit, man. But nowadays,
I don't have any reason to believe that much of that stuff is really helpful. But yeah, it is. It is.
I had a friend, and one of his light bulbs broke, and his whole crop failed from mercury.
Oh,
I believe that.
Oh, lame.
And I've also seen it burn down people's grow. One of my old mentors gave me like a 10K finishing bulb for the CMH. He's like, yeah, but I heard these things sometimes blow up and like catch on fire. So I never actually used it, just stayed in the box that he gave it to me. But with that said, I want to introduce Russ Brandon. He joined us a little bit late. So Brandon, you could introduce yourself. We're talking about lighting schedules. And then I'm going to have Monkey tell us his lighting schedule, and then we'll have you do yours.
Oh, I can fill you in on some cool stuff. Anyway, I'm Brandon Rust. If you guys aren't familiar, you can find my Instagram profile, the same name right there on the bottom left-hand corner, Rust.Brandon. And then you can also stop by BokashiEarthworks.com for microbes, fertilizers. I'll have soil available soon. All kinds of cool stuff going on.
Good stuff for sure. And if you're not familiar already, we've got Macky and Monkey with us from percysgrowroom.com. I'm going to pass it over to Monkey, who is going to tell us about his the lighting that he uses and the lighting schedule that he uses for flower and veg.
Well, in my tents, the small tents as they would be, it's all LED. And just so happens between the two shows, I was having to rehang a light in the tent. So I actually did check some numbers. So on veg, I'm pretty much like Spartan. I'm 18.6 for veg. Started that way. It's never failed me. Why change it? It's one of those deals. I don't use a par meter to check the light levels in veg. That's more eyeball that thing. If she's stretching too much, down either way. But I mean, I can pretty much read your veg pretty well. For flower, just so happens, again, when I rehung the light, I did check it. It's running 850 on par. And because I was the last one to go, I did my homework assignment and I checked the DLI at 36.7. That's the first time I've ever done that. I don't use DLI to calculate anything. To me, it's not comfortable. I'm just an old grower that started growing flowers and vegetables outside and just kind of learned what plants look like. And I've pretty much taken this indoors. And once I got used to the equipment, and now that I have it dialed in, the cheap home grow, the high on homegrown way of doing it is keep it simple. And that's pretty much what I do. 18.6 for veg, 12.12 for flower, somewhere around between 700 to 1,000 par level for flower, and all under LEDs. Basic stuff.
I think keeping it simple is very. Go ahead, Tal. I'm sorry I cut you off.
I was just saying, I love the smoke coming out of him. It's like his little screen. It's awesome.
It's a good one for sure.
That's not his avatar. That's actually him. He just sits really still.
Really.
I'm happy that he's actually being. You can actually see him on the YouTube. Sometimes people have like cool little logos or backgrounds. Like the American one, we can see his actual icon, but on YouTube you don't see anything. You can just hear him. So we got an update there with the logo, Monkey. Cool stuff
Monkey
there.
works.
But Brandon, I wanted to give you the opportunity because it sounded like you have some interesting information, maybe some recent updates about lighting. So what kind of lights are you growing under? I know in the past, actually, when I first met you, you were using CMH, the 315s kind of spread out. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience with those, and then how it's different than LED, and then your time on versus time off for veg and flower.
Okay, so I've always, since I very first started, have grown with mixed light, and it was usually checkerboard patterns between HPS and metal halide bulbs. And it wasn't even my setup. It was the guys that taught me. And so I just replicated that forever. In 2014, I switched all over to CMH lights. And I was running those. Since that same time period, I was running my veg at 8 hours off and then 16 hours on. And but what I've come to realize using LEDs is you can meet your DLI in a faster period of time, and as long as you don't let those. Okay, so what's controlling the photoperiodism is the dark time, because there are proteins that build up in the presence of light, and then they degrade in the presence of dark. And if these things don't fully degrade in the presence of darkness, then they'll keep staying in a vegetative. The longer dark period time, the more it has for these proteins to degrade, and then it signals that it's time for that thing to start its reproductive cycle. So that this, like, you can reach your DLI period of time, and as long as you don't let those proteins completely degrade, all you have to do is switch the light on for a little bit. You could essentially, and you're probably going to see this more in commercial cultivation, people who want to decrease their power consumption, is that they're going to start figuring out the DLIs for specific varieties, and then they'll be able to see how long they can keep them in the dark before they actually start to flower. So that, and there is already information on other plants. And you can see this kind of also how it happens in nature. Like during the seasons, they change and the light intensity changes, and you're not often always getting a really bright, intense light until you're like later in the season and at certain periods of the day. And it's kind of that same concept. If they have an adequate amount of light for a long enough period of time, they'll be able to build up a high quantity of those PR proteins into PFR, and then that PFR degrades back to the PR protein, and it just cycles like that. So that's one thing that you can take into consideration that people are looking more at with commercial lighting, just for energy saving.
Joe Pietri, or Joe P, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's been recently talking on the Skunk Fan podcast about, he promotes what some people call the gas lantern routine. He calls it the 12 on, 1 off paradigm. And he believes that for his veg, to, like you're talking about, all you need to do is interrupt the dark cycle. So he'll go 12 hours on for his veg, and then wait 5 hours darkness. And in the middle of the night, turn the lights on for 1 hour. and
Yeah.
that breaks up the dark cycle, preventing them from going into flower.
Right.
And then you go 5 hours dark.
So
But it gives lower DLI. I mean, it gives less time to grow, right? So you're
Right.
reducing the growth potential.
So I don't
No.
agree with it for
No,
indoor
here's the thing.
cultivation, but for
Right.
Brandon was talking about, and what he's talking about is like greenhouse cultivation. People who grow chrysanthemums, right? They'll do
Right.
this because they're trying to get the lowest cost of production possible. They're not trying to maximize production.
Yeah. If you're just supplementing the sun and using the sun
So-
for your primary light, I agree.
So here's the thing. So given that it has access to the right nutrition in that specific period of time that they are photosynthetically active and they're receiving that light,
Yeah.
my understanding is like this. They will build up all of the enzymes and all of the proteins and all of the things that they're doing while they're photosynthesizing. And then they'll kind of stop. Like they're limited in the amount that they can actually produce. And it's not,
No.
and it's
That
gonna-
part's not true. I mean, unless they run out of something, Brandon. So if they run out of nitrogen, then they've run out. Yeah. And then that's going to become the limiting factor. That's the plank in Jack's little tub holding in the water. But as long as all of their needs are met, they don't meet some sort of photosynthetic threshold where they can't continue to photosynthesize anymore. There's no 24-hour sort of limit on that. There are
No,
second by second limits based on availability of water, nutrients, light, carbon dioxide, stuff like that.
Well, you can see, like, if you have a plant that has all the proper nutrition, the environmental conditions, but you never turn the light off, you can see things like light stress. And it's because the plant is like still in an active state when it wants to really be in a different state. So it has a different set of processes that are happening.
That's not what the studies that have really looked at in sort of day length with cannabis have shown. So there are stresses, and some plants do better than with 24-hour zero than others. But it's not because of sort of running out of ability to photosynthesize. It can be, other parameters getting out of range. And I agree, having a dark period, most plants seem to like having at least a nominal dark period to establish a cycle in the 24-hour day. So I'm not really arguing that point.
You'll see less stress that way too. If, like, I've always run like about 16-hour veg, but if I'm running my lights more intense, I could drop that down, and I get a benefit because the plant isn't as stressed.
They're not exactly, you can't just trade PPFD for duration. We were talking about this before you came on the air, actually, and sort of deeper into that issue, at least my thoughts on DLI.
Well, it's
duration
it's dark,
and density are not trade-offs.
That's what they're talking about, is that dark period has to be broken up so that those proteins don't completely.
The dark period has to be broken up if you want to give more than 12 hours of darkness and keep your plants in a vegetative state. But the question is, why do you want to give your plants more than 12 hours of darkness if you're trying to grow them? It's not going to grow them any faster. So I agree that it is an effective way to give your plants less or more than 12 hours of darkness and keep them from going into flowering. But I think the uses for that are limited because it's not efficient to time. You're slowing down growth. And certainly, like in a commercial setting, we don't ever want to slow the plants down. You want to sort of time everything so you do everything on time and it finishes on time and it's ready to go on time. If you find yourself, thinking I want to grow my plants slower, you should just like start later or something like that. I mean, that's what I would advise a commercial client.
So one of the theories, I guess, to support Joe's stance, and I'm actually with Dr. MJ on this, I think that the plants can and do take more light and will be able to handle a whole 12-hour light cycle for like flower, for example. But he's suggesting even in flower to drop, not do 12-12, he's like 12-1 veg. And then I think he suggests between 6 and 8 hours of light for flower, because he says most places, if you look at their direct sunlight, get 8 hours or less of sun per day.
And see, the flaw there is, why are you trying to mimic what happens outdoors? we're growing indoors, and we're sort of more limited by what the plants can handle than like what they typically deal with in nature. We're really actually trying to improve that with like stationary lighting, for example. Plants absolutely are able to harvest more photons at lower densities in an indoor grow setting than they are outdoors. So I don't really want my plants to have, 6 hours of suboptimal lighting, a few hours of overly intense lighting, and then another 4 hours of inadequate lighting on the other side. We can demonstrably grow plants faster, bigger, and healthier by, keeping them under steady lighting during that period. So I question the scientific evidence or knowledge that starts from the perspective of we have to duplicate what happens outdoors, because I really don't believe that that's the direction that the indoor horticulture goes in. I mean, we're making things sort of different, but better in a lot of ways.
That's the goal, right? At least, I mean, like horticulture varies from nature, and like, what could we do to make nature the best possible? What's the best possible environment to get it to grow in? The best temperature, best humidity, best airflow. Because if you watch nature, you can just say, oh, just do it like nature. But then if you're in Oklahoma and there's a tornado, you're not going to replicate a tornado that's going to come and rip up all your crops and your facilities and throw them all around, because that doesn't make any sense.
Locusts.
Yeah. So I'm with you totally on, we can try and optimize as much as possible to what we find is best in the science. And from what we understand so far, it seems like that if you want to maximize production, that giving more light is one of the better avenues to do it. This individual seems more like their worry is that the cost of the pound is going to go down. And for people to want to stay in business in the commercial setting, if you're going to be doing outdoor, or not outdoor, like greenhouse or even indoor cultivation, they believe power is going to be one of the number one costs. And if you can't get your pound prices down to compete with the greenhouse and outdoor cultivation, then you won't be able to sell it.
Directly hurt yield. I mean, the less light you give, particularly the less light you give during veg just slows the plants down. You're going to have to extend the veg period, which you're probably going to end up using more electricity in the long run, because it's not just the lights that you're dealing with, it's all the climate control equipment and all the rest of that, plus the space that you're sort of occupying for that longer period of time. And then in flower, it's just going to directly lower your yield. I mean, you give your plants less light during the flowering period, you're going to get less flowers off of the plants at the end of it. And then this is one of the big advantages that nobody ever talks about with auto flowers is you can give them more light during the flowering period and absolutely get more harvest per square foot because of that.
One of the things I was going to say is you've actually seen growers on Cocoa for Cannabis try this, and compared to their previous grows, stunt the plants, lower the yields, slow down the growth rates, and have extremely negative experiences. So that was one of the reasons you investigated this kind of heavily in the past. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past.
Yeah.
So that is an important implication. But to play a little bit of devil's advocate, the places where I could see it benefiting is where he's advocating that people don't like. For example, if you have a greenhouse, certain people, we refer to them as like chads, right? Where a chad is an investor whose parents have a bunch of money and they're not really from the cannabis scene, but they get into it. They don't know too much, so they hire a master grower. And that master grower says, I read in High Times that the best veg is 24 hours on, and that's what we're going to do even in a greenhouse. So they get a bunch of HPS and they run them all 24 hours on for their veg cycle. When that increases the heat, that increases the cost of production massively, and they could get away with doing like the gas lantern routine in a greenhouse where they've got the sun supplementing most of the time and they don't need to run.
I agree.
Light.
I agree. In a greenhouse, and you brought this up last time we talked about it, I think that's why it's called the gas lamp routine, is that, you'd go out with an actual lantern and like give your plants a little bit of light in the middle of the dark so that they wouldn't go into flowering or start off in flowering. That's often a problem in northern latitudes where you'd want to get the plants in the ground before the day lengths are long enough at that point, So I see uses for it in those kind of settings. And if the sun is your primary light, and then, every little bit of secondary lighting, because lighting is expensive. I'm not sort of knocking that either, but it's like trying to, buy less gas for your car while you're still trying to drive as far. I mean, there's a limit to how much you can play that game and actually sort of get away with it.
Totally. And I think that one of the places it could be used is just like keep mothers as mothers, or in like the nursery industry where they're growing any types of flowering plants, just to keep it out of flower for a longer period of time than they would in that season naturally. So it's got a time and a place, but it's not like something that I think everybody should just broadly apply to their situation, especially if, like everybody else on the panel, we went around, everybody shared their lighting recommendation or current use and why it's working for them just fine. And nobody's being forced to use the gas lantern regime. And everybody here seems to have moderate amounts of success for their own cultivation. Otherwise, I think they wouldn't be doing it. So
I don't know, mate. Nowadays, with electricity prices going up the way they are, I think we're all going to be forced for that gas lamp routine pretty soon, bro.
that could be. We got to get on the solar train, I guess. Matthew Gates, I'm curious if you have any thoughts. You talked a little bit earlier about the implications of maybe different DLIs, or just curious if you have thoughts on light cycles in general, if there's past implications and things like that.
Talking about this always reminds me, not always, but it sometimes reminds me of like a long time ago. Cells were they had to exist in an environment very different from ours, we think, and like an anaerobic environment, an environment where there wasn't even a lot of oxygen in the environment. And then over time, tons of time, those cells became, those cells developed in different environments, but we still have that machinery in our cells from that bygone era, those halcyon days of like a very radically different world. And the reason I bring this up is because with regards to like when we're talking about things like plant sensitivity to darkness, photoperiod, that kind of thing, and like the heritability of it genetically, like I'm fascinated about the idea of like still like kind of how it even comes about, what's happening physiologically to allow for it to happen. I do want to echo what Dr. Coco was saying earlier, that it is kind of an eloquent way to put it, that these organisms are trying to survive in an environment, and they developed with it being a certain way for a very long time. Supposedly a long time, very, very long time ago, even the number of what we might even time hours in a day was different slightly. And a bunch of other things like amount of oxygen in the environment and CO2 in the environment, and again, other gases. As far as pests are concerned, that sort of a thing, I'd like to just remind people that, like the plant physiology does change quite a bit when, depending on the plant, from when it's daytime and photosynthesis is happening and when it's not happening. And although I don't know if it happens a lot in cannabis, myself, I don't think I've really encountered this at all, but there's something to be said of like the assimilation of those sugars, and how sometimes even too much of those sugars can be kind of a bad thing. It processes a lot of the primary and secondary metabolism of the plant, of course. That's very important, and the more photosynthesis, generally the better it is. But there could be some situations where if those sugars are assimilated and you got a ton of them and they don't have a place to go, or you have some sort of stressful event, what comes to my mind is like an event where the irrigation isn't functioning very well, indoors, outdoors, whatever. If like water doesn't get to the plant, quickly you can have an optimal environment become sort of suboptimal, even if you've done all this preparatory work in the first place. And I just feel like, it's just important to think of it as a system of systems. You gotta, for the photosynthesis to work well and for you to get the product that you want, it's not just light, it's not just dark period, it's not just one of these many factors, even the abstract of DLI. Like Dr. Coco said, having, knowing the sum of those of that equation, knowing the inputs that give you the output of that equation, I think is kind of fundamentally better, because it allows you to make more precise, or sort of a more precise informed decision making process, or an understanding. And I'm really glad that a lot of people are learning about that. Lately, VPD, I was working with somebody recently. I know Dr. Coco doesn't pay as much attention to it. And to be honest, a lot of times I don't as well. But I do know that it can have it's a really helpful model for explaining how a very complex system works. And the more I work in this system, more work in this industry, the more I have an appreciation for how complicated it is. And the map is not the terrain. And that's what I'll say about that.
I don't mean to be a total VPD hater. I understand.
No, not at all. Me neither.
My point is really, like you're saying, it's the underlying, the temperature and humidity are both independently important, not just in their sort of combined impact on VPD.
No, I agree. I think that's actually that I would champion. I always champion people like asking questions and understanding, but why, like if somebody just learns VPD, but they don't understand kind of what that is, then I don't know, like they can do so much more with, like you say, like the knowing that it's these two things in combination, and has this sort of effect. So of course that's going to be better, I think.
Nobody told me about my phantom that's crept onto my screen there.
I didn't notice.
I'll have to go wrestle the phantom. Hold on.
I thought you were being held hostage by somebody. You had a bag on your head or something.
Oh boy.
There's hostages around. Oh my gosh.
Matthew, I got a question. I understood some certain predator bugs don't keep procreating under 12 and 12. Is that true or is that false?
Yeah, not just predators, but also some pests. Like if the light changes, like in nature, that's a sign of like a changing of the environment, like a season, right? Like what we'd call seasons. And so a lot of organisms, not just plants, have adapted to like respond to that. Like they go into torpor or diapause, or like basically hibernate. Some predators are like that as well. I remember a long time ago talking to a biocontrol specialist, and they were experimenting with some sort of I can't remember if it was like a minute pirate bug or like a wasp or something. I think it was like some sort of like a predator bug, kind of like an Orias or like a Hemiptera, kind of with a proboscis. And anyways, they found that if you had green light, if you put green light in the greenhouses, then it would attract the insects, and it wouldn't affect like the plant's photosynthesis or its it's sort of circadian rhythm, and that kind of thing. It wouldn't cause like problems for it. This wasn't in cannabis, this was in a different crop. But it was a way for them to defeat the diapause problem. And basically what they were able to do is they could just put the lights in at night or at day, and basically wherever there was the pest that went after, I think it was whitefly, it would just work as like a beacon. And I don't know, I think that's kind of cool to sort of exploit. That's the kind of thing, if you know that information, you can exploit those interesting little details.
Well, I think we've covered light a pretty fair amount for this evening, and I think maybe now would be a good time to just get to know our guest a little bit more. And maybe Monkey, you could tell us some of the strains that you're growing and some of the parts of cannabis that interest you.
Oh, right now, what am I growing right now? Let's see. One tent's got Godbud in it. Another tent has got Strawberry Cough, and the third tent is got White Rhino in it right now. What interests me in cannabis is, I guess, just I'm more into the old school strains these days. I'm still discovering old school strains that I haven't tried yet. And to me, that's the most exciting part of what I do. Just new cultivars that everybody's talked about and I've never tried before. See, when you live in a very prohibition area, which I do, you don't really have access. When old school legacy market came around, when you went to try and buy something, you couldn't ask for something specific. Or I guess you could, but what you were going to get is what they had. They'll call it anything else. Like, oh yeah, it's all Star Dog, right?
Yeah, you never asked for it because they'll say, "Yep, I got it."
Exactly. Just reach in the other pocket. Here it is, right here. Exactly what you want. No problem at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, the move was to ask if hey, what do you got?
Yeah, right.
So these days, my
So-
passion in the cannabis though is teaching new growers. I mean, that's what I love to do the most is teaching somebody who doesn't have any idea that they can do this and watching them come out with something that they have never, ever dreamed that they can do. I'll do that every day. I'll put any kind of time into it just to see that, just to have the reaction from the first person that tastes their first homegrown for their first time ever. I mean, that's the payoff right there. And that's why Macky and I do what we do. I mean, we just try and bring it into everybody's home. You know, you can do this too. Anybody can do this. This is not rocket science. This is cannabis growing. That's what the government wants you to think, don't they?
Hey,
That's
Monkey,
what they're
what's your
doing.
impression of the God Bud? Just while
Well, I've never had the God Bud before, but we have people at Percy's growing it all the time. And I just happened to be out in Oregon and met a guy that had actual real seeds, real regs that came down. So I grabbed some. And this is the first chance I've actually put them in the tent. They are beautiful plants. I'll have to say that. I love a beautiful structure on the plants. They're stacking like crazy right now. They're doing everything I could ask them. I'm looking forward to this one.
Tao's made a few crosses with that, right? The
Yeah.
Ophelia, oh God, mixed with something.
yeah, I had God Bud straight from Jordan of the Islands that I crossed with Cheesequake. I called that one Godiva, and then from Jordan of the Islands, he had an offering of God Bud by OG Kush, which he called Oh God. So I crossed the Oh God with the Cheesequake too, and they're both very different and they're both killer. And yeah, I got to applaud and shout out Jordan of the Islands. All the stuff I've ever tried from him has been, if nothing else, it's been potent. He has a lot of shorter, stout, and I don't know if it's me, but they seem to be like slow veggers. But once they get to a certain size, they beef up, and it's always frost-filled good buds. So yeah.
Well, that's what I'm seeing so far. Everything you're talking about there. I mean, this plant had just started flowering, just starting to show really nice, good white froze on it. And I'm already seeing trichomes. I mean, less than half a week in. So I'm going like, this is quality. I got
And you got some monster leaves too, I bet, right? Some fat leaves.
Actually, this one, right now, the flowering leaves are really thin. I'm surprised by the leaf structure right now. I don't know if it's what I'm feeding them or just the time frame right now, but I'm interested in seeing what's going to happen. Early on, they were big and fat, but they're changing as the flowering's going on right now.
I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Yeah.
It's a fun plant to grow right now. I'm enjoying it. But like I said, I grow in small tents. I use the tents about the same size that Jack uses. And sometimes that can get me into trouble because I don't have that overhead height.
I had an update. I know I haven't been here for a couple weeks, but I was kind of disappointed with maybe my results from the Farmer Freeman sex testing. Just thinking that I got a male, and then I chopped the one plant down, and I found some pistils on it. And I was wondering, is it a Hermy? Is it a female? What's going on? Well, in my flower tent, the two larger plants, I almost had the same thing happen. The one plant on the left was like very clearly a female, long, like almost full inch long pistils or stigmas, the hairs that are poking out. It's clearly a female. 2 weeks of flower. I've grown enough plants to know what a female looks like, right? Well, the one next to it starts looking like a male, where if you've ever grown males before, they kind of get like a little like balls. Some people call them balls, the pollen sacs. And around them on the tops, it's not pistils, but stipules, like these little, the things that kind of shoot out the side. It's like a green little, like zigzag, like a kind of like a spike, I guess. And they're about the same size as pistils would be. So when I've grown males in the past, sometimes they look a little female-esque towards the top in early flower because it's just like a round ball with a bunch of little tight, dense clusters. And then you see these little things shooting out of them. I'm like, oh, is that a male? Is that a female? Well, Spartan said a few weeks ago, maybe it's just a late developer, late bloomer. And so with the smaller plants, I actually cut the one down. I told you guys, and then I grafted it, came back to life, and I had to go on a vacation. And I was like, I'm not going to risk it. If it's a male, I'm just killing it. I don't want to make seeds this run. So in the flower tent, I have the two bigger plants, and the same kind of thing was happening. But I'm like, well, I'm going to be here. I'm checking it every single day, morning, night, every day. And I thought it brought up my little jeweler's loop, and I was for sure seeing pistils down low, but up top it was still kind of in that male-esque phase where I was like, is that a male? Well, turns out it has like millimeter long pistils all over it now, like a week later. And it's clearly a full blown female. But I think would be the cookie leaner, I guess, like phenos, because I experienced this as those really, really tight, like little buds. And it's not even like a golf ball, it's like a nickel. Like it's a bunch of really tiny, really, 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 really dense. You almost can't see the pistils. You have to look right up on, and I have pretty good eyes. Like from me to my mic to be able to see the stigmas or pistils, whatever you want to call them, the hairs shooting out of the bud. So anybody who have grown the F2 Velvet Punch, I'm going to be sending you the F3 testers. That's one of the warnings I'm going to give you. Don't think that they're males. I actually reached out to all the people that didn't grow them, so I thought, and several of them were like, even at the F2, were like, I got all males. So I'm wondering if maybe they had the same thought or mistake that I did, where they were just prematurely killing them. What's sometimes labeled as undifferentiated growth. I'll try and find the post from Mean Gene to show the thing from Marijuana Botany that highlights it. But he said he's seen people kill thousands of plants only to find out later that they were actually females, thinking that they were males. So
yeah, I will fucking have no problem cutting down a fucking male, but I wait till the last minute almost. I want to make goddamn sure before I cut it down. That's I'm real picky, so I'll let them go. I don't care. I'll let them go for a while. And just keep a close eye on them. You know, I mean, they don't just open like in an hour. It's not like they don't open that fast.
Well, there are more borderline cases. I mean, there's some males where you're like, okay, this is a male. There's no question about it.
For sure.
It sounds like Jack was dealing with a much more borderline, and yeah, you got to be suspicious. So I think you're probably right, Jack. I think probably some of the people that thought they got all males may have called early.
I was actually happy because a few people just grew them and then never posted anything. And they're like, oh yeah, like I actually got some killer shit. And I just never told you about it. Or I grew it and had to shut things down for one reason or another. But yeah, it was cool. More of the people who got them grew them than I actually realized initially. So it was a good thing.
So back to our guests.
Yes, maybe we could get a little bit of an update from Macky. Percy's growroom. Always,
we'll call him Percy. That's fine.
Flipping.
I know who you mean, man. It doesn't matter.
Same.
None of it is my real name, so
that's true, right? Just call him Macky, Percy's growroom, just all one.
That's right.
Like a big German word or something.
Double barrel surname. That's what it is.
Really I like him. No, you don't want to know that. So.
Ricky Bobby. But,
that'll do. I like
same question that we asked Monkey, or I asked Monkey, is kind of what are you growing right now, and what has interested you in cannabis? What's got you into it, and what keeps you so excited about it?
And I just enjoy growing. Really, it's a nice hobby, and I think a lot of people in the audience would agree that it's good for people's mental health to have something to focus on every day like this. And I've pretty much grown every day for the last 12 years. So a few years ago, I wanted to make a cannabis forum that was specifically ran by its community rather than having any special interests or, being run for profit or something like that. So I made Percy's Grow Room, and I don't know, it's all just history from there really regarding my interest in cannabis. So we also have the High on Homegrown podcast, which is from percysgrowroom.com. So that definitely keeps my interest in cannabis peaked because we interview loads of different people all the time. A couple of times a week, we have interviews with legends, man. Like if you would have said 2 years ago, Macky, you're going to be speaking to Jorge Cervantes pretty soon. And it's like, behave. Steve D'Angelo and Ed Rosenthal and Tommy Chong will be on your show 5 times. You're going to celebrate his birthday with Tommy Chong. All this shit would have been like, you crazy, man. But, here we are after interviewing all these legends that I don't feel like I really deserve their time as much as they give it to us. It's crazy.
We're fortunate. Thankfully, the weed and cannabis community, or whatever you want to refer to it as, is a little bit smaller than I think a lot of us realize from the outside.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. There's only really so many people doing anything, podcasting, reading. I mean, there's a lot of people growing and consuming cannabis, but less so growing. I mean, any grower is part of the very, very, very small population of people that actually grow cannabis.
And I think anybody who does consume cannabis, either for medical, I mean, if they can, when they use it for medical use, but for recreational use, anybody consuming cannabis needs to grow some of their own just to get that experience and understand where the plant comes from. You'll learn so much about it in just one grow. It will change your whole perspective on the plant itself and what cannabis is.
Speaking of what it is and what it can be or what it isn't, Sometimes you might think it's a male. This is from Marijuana Botany. This is the post that I was talking about on Mean Gene. This is from 190 weeks ago, so I had to scroll quite a while to find this. But he's got it listed as staminate primordia, which goes down to staminate flower, which you can see here. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. I'm circling the bottom left. That is a male pollen sac. Some people call them balls, but that's what I was describing kind of earlier. This one in the middle right here is what I was seeing. And at the top, you see the circle where it says undifferentiated vegetative growth. It sort of looks like a ball. If you go to the left, they're pretty similar. And the only major change is the pistils once they start sprouting out. And you can see this little line. I think that is what I was describing as I'm blanking on the term actually. But yeah, that you can see the female. Stipule is the word I was using, but pistillate calyx here for the female. So it kind of goes from top to bottom. Far right is female, 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 all the way down. Middle is that undifferentiated growth where it can be tricky and you have to be patient and really look up close and try and identify them because.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what Spartan said there. Just wait a little bit longer, give it a couple more days, and you'll be 100% sure.
Especially if it's in veg. I see people asking me like, yo, is this a male or is this a female? And they're like not showing anything. It's just like a veg plant. I'm like,
yeah. Is
it in flower yet? And they're like, no. I'm like, how old is it? They're like 3 weeks, 2 weeks or whatever. I'm like, if it was an auto, maybe you'd be able to tell, but most
ask it what it identifies as.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's definitely an interesting one there for me because I really, like I said in the past, I've had over 100 tests at the Farmer Freeman sex testing, and 100 of them were accurate. And then I had like 2 that ended up being labeled as female that looked like a male to me, and ended up chopping down one of the amiaces the run before. So I'm wondering, that one might have been I actually just like mixed up a sample, but I'm even questioning now, was it a male or was it just a late bloomer?
So, why did you cut it down so soon? Why didn't you wait until you could be 100% sure?
The one, most recently, the Velvet Punch, I had 4 plants. I thought all 4 of them were female, and 2 were in like my veg space, which is smaller, and 2 were in the flower space. The 2 in the veg space, I flipped earlier, and I went on honeymoon / not honeymoon, like an anniversary vacation with my wife. And it was at that time where, like Spartan said, they're not going to open in the next hour, but if you're gone for like 3 or 4 days, there's a lot more potential, especially when it's right on the precipice. They're like 2 or 3 weeks in, they're starting to get that sort of look where I was like, that looks like a lot of balls, but it was a lot of just really tight, dense flower clusters. And the thing that was craziest to me was when I looked under the scope, how frost covered it was. I was like, if this was a male, it would have been like an amazing male to breed with. But it was just so frosty and I couldn't find any pollen. I was smashing them up in paper towels and I was like splitting open what I thought were the, flower or pollen sacs. There was nothing inside it. So I was like, damn, I fucked up. But, sometimes you gotta better safe than sorry.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Not doing a seed run this time. I've done the F2 seed run. I've done the F3 seed run. So I'm not making F4s right now. Just doing my own in-house testing before I send them out to my tester group.
Yeah, loads of people, well, the listeners from the show when you came on for the 420 session we had, and a couple of members of the forum as well, they've received seeds from you and they're going to pop some of them beans.
Good stuff. Yeah, I sent out a bunch this year on 420. Anybody basically who asked if they're in the US, I was happy to send them to them.
We did the snail race.
Oh yeah, that was a fun time.
Remember?
Petri Farm members. But anybody have thoughts or topics that maybe we haven't gotten to yet earlier? I know Matthew, you mentioned you wanted to share with Dr. MJ that really crazy overhyped light. I don't know if you brought the link with you. You could share a screen.
I have the link. It's already loaded.
Okay, so Doc, maybe like a month ago at this point, we talked about this light, and it made pretty much every claim under the sun, other than we're better than the actual sun as a grow light. It was like making like harmonic frequency. Like I'll let you see the actual.
Oh
thing.
yes, I remember this.
It's a very interesting claim.
It had patented grounding technology.
Yes,
I remember that. It's always a feature that I look for when I'm reviewing grow lights.
I wonder how that figures into the energy efficiency. How does that figure in?
You should see if you can get a free one to test for them and see if you can figure that out.
Probably could, Matthew, but
you probably
that comes along with certain obligations then to like actually test it and put up video and stuff, and then people are likely to buy it. So,
that's true. That's true. You don't want copycat situations.
We'll see. Yeah, but what did you want to ask about it?
Well, here, let me share the screen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so viewers from 2 weeks ago, we went over this a little bit already, but what there was a there was oh yeah, this was one of the
Points of
interest-
contention, the par
yeah,
map.
points of contentions. Yes, the par map.
Okay. What is
Look at
just
the
in
spread.
general?
Yeah, look at the spread, Doc. The corners versus the middle there. You got 16-14 in the middle. You got
Yeah.
150 at the corner.
Yeah, so there's no walls probably. I don't see what the
It's like a
dimensions.
laser. It's a laser straight down.
I don't see what the dimensions are of the grid. So it's really hard to be able to evaluate a par map. I mean, is this a 4x4 or 5x5 or some
Who
other shape?
knows? Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I don't think we even brought that part up. There were other parts that just seemed so wonky.
Yeah, that's a huge drop off. So I would assume when I see that there's no reflective walls and that it's probably hung. Does it say how high it's hung? These are important things to include when you're publishing par maps. Is like
for
the
the
size
audience-
of the test area and the hanging height of the fixed.
No, Doc.
Why
They
is
want you
that
to know
important,
laser
Doc?
or no laser.
Just
Hey.
drive that home.
Right.
The output automatically adjusts when you use the laser, bro.
Right. And they're terrible, right? Is that also, I mean, you wouldn't want it that hot in the middle and you wouldn't want it that cold on the.
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of the summary we came to. And Matthew, if you can go back a few slides to the list of all the claims, that was a pretty good one. I think Doc will really enjoy the ag light features. There we go.
This one?
I think these actually, I think I've got emails from them wanting
Oh
to
my.
test them.
What's that earth sense they're talking about there? Earth sense, that Schumann.
Oh yeah, the Schumann resonance,
Schumann
which is
resonance.
a thing, but like that's like
it's
a,
just a
Yeah,
thing.
this is their grounding system that I was talking about. So there's like a cable, I guess, that goes out and you stick it in the soil.
Intelligent microprocessor controlled
I think-
grounding system.
Yeah,
with
it's
sensory
generated and
feedback.
it's
What?
injected directly into the potted soil and environment.
all I know is that my brother's
Like you need one for every
stepbrother's
pot.
friend's mother, like
Yeah.
he took 2 Schumann resonances to the face and he was never the same again. It's he
Yeah.
just walked right through the field and I don't know.
Well, this is like the vibrations, guys. Cannabis is a magical plant and it leads to magical thinking and it leads growers to want to believe that there's
I don't know,
some
man.
sort
I
of
think-
things like this that you might be able to do to like spike the lemonade a little bit more. Like,
I think it's
you
more
know-
like acid that makes you think this way. The earth sense.
right.
Definitely the lysergic.
But yeah, like they're preying on sort of gullibility. But I guess we're just sort of prone to be gullible a little bit because we're usually high and cannabis is magical. So, I think that's why we're going to keep seeing like marketing like this, to be honest with you.
Hey,
There was
social
another-
proof is a big thing. You probably know this better than anyone. But yeah, it's yeah, I mean, I looked at other people, and if somebody else came to me and I didn't know any better, and they said, "Hey, this light is working fine for me," I might be liable to say, "Well, why don't I try it out?" Right? So
Yeah,
what
or
really
if you're
sells it for
comparing
me-
2 different lights, and one of them has a cable that you plug into the soil, and the other one doesn't have a cable that you plug into the soil.
what are they
Well,
doing wrong?
Give me the one that's got the cable.
The major
like-
selling point of this model is the easy click attachment. Look at that. This
I
is what you
hate
want when you
everything
grow
about
light.
this. I'm just gonna be completely honest. I hate
I'm
actually kind
fucking
of surprised that they can even use that in their marketing because typically you have to be able to back up your claims on a product where it's considered false advertising. You could potentially get sued.
They potentially
This
could,
is the
but
one.
they're probably
Photophilus
foreign
must be
company
true.
with no U.S. presence.
Must
so.
be true.
Did you know?
Yeah,
I
that's a
don't-
good
you know-
question. I don't, what does that mean? even?
I struggle to
Photophilius.
know-
What's that?
That means they
Photophilus?
like light.
That's
I
that
struggle
means
to
they
find
like
a
light,
plant that
exactly.
doesn't. Spartan, you were saying something earlier. Oh, did you go? Did you drop out?
No, I'm still here.
Oh no, you're still there. Oh, that's weird.
You count on me, Matthew. I'm always here.
I know exactly. Oh well, it's your internet connection. I know that you're the noble one, but you never know sometimes with these connections. But you were saying something.
I don't remember what I was saying.
It sounded like it was going to be kind of wise, so I wanted to hear it.
Oh, about this. Oh, this just I was wanting to know about what's the connection here. How does it impart disease resistance?
What is the laser system in the first place, though? What are they talking about?
Is that
They're
like
claiming a
So
0
it's-
watt somehow, because it said 600 watt without lasers, and then it said 600 watt with lasers. So somehow the lasers are adding a total of 0 watts. If you go
Oh,
break, just
Yeah,
apart
Shori
your-
lasers, no problem.
No, this
Laser.
is, each unit's 25 watts of laser, dude.
but they're not even including that, and or maybe they're turning down the rest of the light, and then by 50, and then they're upping.
I'm just
by 50
guessing that
with
they're
lasers.
probably not reporting the most accurate statistics, Jack. I think the fact that you're like, but this wattage that they reported must be accurate. I think
That's probably true. I will say 660
Yeah.
is a good light if you want it to a diode. It doesn't have to be a laser. 660
What
nanometer
the
red.
hell?
I
What
use
is
that in my
the
light.
what is the laser? What are they shooting out of there? What
660 nanometer and 450 nanometer.
Yeah, so I mean, those
in
are fine.
lasers?
And
Yeah, but why
Lasers
use a
are
laser
stupid.
is the point.
Yeah, what is the light? Wait, exactly the point. You want the light to spread out, not to
You
like.
don't want
Oh,
commonly-
man,
You don't want to
laser.
beam
Cool.
particularly random parts of your plant with a laser of 660 nanometer light. What the hell?
Oh, that's
Lasers
the
and
insect. That's the
crystals,
insect
man.
repellent. That's it.
Oh yeah, I
With
know. It's
lasers.
yeah, it's just gonna laze them like
Blind
It's
them.
IPM. I'm sure it's an IPM.
Exactly.
Oh,
It's
that's
an IPM light. That's
hysterical.
why you have the wire in the soil. It's part of the insect feature.
I looked
It's
into that,
Exactly,
and
right.
laser
Yeah.
pointers don't grow plants very well. They did experiments to see, like for NASA's space station, if
Yeah,
laser
but there's loads
pointers
of them on
would
there.
work.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, we really do want the light to spread out. I mean, you'd have to have an entire like laser array and like, beaming down. No, it won't work. Like the point of a laser is that it's
Oh,
a
it does-
beam
it
of
does
light
zap
that
the
doesn't
pest.
spread out.
What if lasers are moving constantly across the canopy, man? I'm gonna invent a light.
I do kind of like the idea of like a little AI
Scanning lasers, right?
Yeah, just
Oh my
like yeah,
gosh.
like little moths and things. I did. People were found the a lot of people at least found the that IR sensor system I shared on Instagram really interesting, where they use the drone and the
Yeah.
propellers to just eviscerate like a moth
Chop them up. Yes.
or something. Yeah, that's and then like people were like, it was interesting to see some folks' comments of that it's just getting people, making people distant and separated from the earth and the natural environment and and I'm
Well, my
thinking to
mind went
myself
totally
like,
different. I was thinking, when is that fucking thing going to be man-sized and chasing me down?
oh yeah, see,
that's
that's
what scared
the man hacks from Half-Life are a real thing now.
I will say from the practical perspective, the more realistic thing is like when you look at like Parabug or who drops like beneficial insects onto a crop from a drone, or these cameras that are using infrared or other camera technologies to see where a crop is either getting hot, cold, dry, attacked by pests, variations of different things for like an acre. For most farmers, not just cannabis, but like food crops are, I believe, over 60 years old in the United States. So having the ability for somebody who's older to not have to physically go out and walk or drive a tractor or do some of these other things when they could have a little rechargeable electronic drone, it's an efficiency thing. Like, sure, maybe there's going to be less jobs hired, but that person might just not hire those people at all and then not do the scouting.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Most farm workers aren't over 60. Most farm owners are, and family farm owners are certainly aging, but they often hire in younger workers to do a bulk of the heavy labor on a farm.
And I feel like that's a really good point that you make. I think that people really discount the fact that, like you say, the population of farmers are aging, and also for one thing, the system, there were two systems that they were talking about. One was the just the monitor system, and the other one was like the monitor system and the drone. I think they worked in parallel, and these were moths, which, by the way, are active at night when you're asleep. So and also it would be ludicrous, like it was fascinating to me the number of people who are like, or you could just look at your plants. And that's true. I don't think you should just not look at your plants, but if you've got like an eye in the sky that's like literally scanning for these pests 24/7 and it sees something you happen to not, isn't that could be really great if they lay
Yeah,
like
that would be cool.
1,000
It's got a
eggs on all
laser
your
beam on it.
plants. Well, and that's
just
well,
zap that thing.
yeah, zap.
How's it any
Photonic
different than a
fence.
fucking filter that we've been using for fucking longer than I've been alive? Filters do the same shit. You're sucking bugs against them and suffocating them against a filter all day long. You're okay with that. So how can you be not?
But
okay with
laser beams,
dropping them
bro.
out? Yeah,
Laser beams.
It's more humane. It just zaps
It's
them
a
right out. They're
laser.
done.
Yeah,
There's that
direct
thing called the
energy
Dynatrap
weapons.
that uses like a UV thing that attracts bugs in there. But Matthew was saying kind of kills everything, not just like the bad pests. It attracts a bunch of stuff and kills them off. But I know Sungrown 707 uses them to not get moths or caterpillars in his crop for a small little outdoor section that he's growing in. So there's definitely interesting options out there for attracting and getting rid of pests.
I definitely agree. And and going back to this light, I don't know how long I want to spend on it, but yeah, just going through some of these, they're just kind of interesting. Like I did find this kind of an interesting comment, these sorts of parts here, where I think they're just describing how, like, if it's photosynthetic, or if it's getting photosynthesis, these things happen.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how it would be special for this particular model that wouldn't be happening to other ones, but just
Right.
again,
I really almost all of those claims as like compared to keeping your plants in the dark.
right. Well, that's the control, I
Right.
guess, right?
It's the increased yield. You're going to get better fruit. It's going to prevent diseases.
fruit.
Like the plants aren't going to die in less than a week. Like, you know, all of those things.
These are like sky is blue comments. Like the sky is
Yes.
blue. Yes.
right.
it is.
Compared to what?
Always.
Compared to
Right.
yeah, dark closet. So.
Like it's blue if I use this light or if I use any other light, but you're just kind of stating a scientific fact, like kind of not
Right.
really related to the light, but just seems
Nice.
fancy.
But
These
it's got
people just like
scalar
fancy
wavelengths.
language. So
I think this is a weapon in like the Star Trek.
Oh my
franchise.
God.
like
The
magnetic
scalar
hydrodynamic
wavelengths.
water and nutrient conditioners.
Dude, the super Emerson effect. That's the first time I've seen
That
that
was my
claimed.
favorite. The Super Emerson.
Yeah,
Super
I made
Emerson.
I liked. I
Wait,
made
but
the
wait,
Super Saver
motorized
loop.
AI optic robotic detection and movement arrays?
Oh geez.
Automated
We're giving
recovery
these people way
protocols
too
for
much
what?
publicity.
Skynet, bro. Skynet. Fuck.
Yeah.
This
Flashing
light
a little
actually
too much
walks
Ghost in
around
the
your
Shell.
house at night and
It's
defends
the
your home.
singularity.
Genetic training. I love that.
Oh what?
It trains your plants for you?
Faster genetic training. The last bullet.
It does LST for you.
No, that's genetic training.
Yeah, so
it'll
if you're
turn it-
breeding and you want a more purple plant, it'll get more purple after one generation when you use
These are
this.
genetic.
just
What is
train
This
it.
is like when you're
training?
learning about genetics. That's your genetic training. It's gonna
That's
train you
amazing.
faster.
It comes with a
That's
genetics
amazing.
textbook.
You're right.
Like,
Like a little like a lesson to like links to YouTube videos.
The light waters
Well,
are
yeah.
popular too.
Here's
I have
here's the technical stuff. I don't know. You know, they still don't bring up, I think,
All
the
super
things-
accurate, I'm sure.
Oh yes, probably.
I have
Oh, it's
related-
pretty. So right off the bat, 2.3 micromoles per joule as a a total or a sphere test number. That would be fine if it was from a par test, but that's not a very efficient light. Most
that's 'cause
everything
you
on the
get
market
you
is
gotta
higher than
run
that
the
right now.
You got to run the ground amplifier.
Oh, right. I
And the
forgot about all the
robots.
power there.
The
Most of
lasers.
it's
It's that
The
wire in the
lasers.
dirt that does
It's
the trick,
resonating
though.
with
That's
the
what it is.
ground.
You have to
You
have
guys
the
are
dirt
forgetting you can
wire.
hang it 27 feet high because it has lasers and the hot spot is 13,000 in the middle.
Wow.
But I have the Chandra et al. Study, which is probably like the most, in my opinion, and I think Doc might agree with me on this, as far as
Yeah.
like cannabis research that's been done about lighting and cannabis plants. That's probably like one of the most well conducted and well
Certainly the
recorded.
questions that they addressed, that's the studies that we use to answer those questions that they addressed. They didn't address every question that we would want to, but yeah, that's an authoritative study for sure.
Some good ones for sure. And this, to answer your question, Doc, it's a 16 square foot coverage. So that's a 4x4 space for a 600 watt light. That's what we were expecting out of like a 600 watt HPS back in the day. I think it would be a lot too much light for a 4x4, especially with the 1600 in the center that we were seeing earlier.
Right.
System wattage is 715.
Yeah, 685 watts is going to be a lot to put into a 4x4 tent.
Oh
pretty
wow,
much, period.
715.
But it's not very
715
efficient.
watts. 750.
Oh, that's a different.
They're
So
comparing
this
it
is
to a
Fluence.
That's
the
the Fluence.
685
They're,
versus
they're justifying their
715.
amazing price tag because they're saying that you can use less of their lights to make the coverage. So it's really cheaper to buy their lights. Only 59,000 as
Bargain.
opposed to 84.
You have to pay more to run. Yeah.
I'm buying one right now.
Oh man,
Hold
that
on,
was
hold
the
on.
exact
You know what else they're
opposite we
doing there though?
wanted.
Did you guys catch that they're giving you 8.1 grows per year instead of 6.5 because that's how much faster they're going, I guess, with these lights.
Oh my.
That's
my
genetic
goodness.
training right there.
I missed that. That's one of the best claims they've made yet.
Yeah.
I've never seen somebody pull 8. I mean,
I
regular
mean,
crops.
6.5 is pretty aggressive.
Damn
but,
right.
that's damn good. You're cranking if you got 6.
well,
6
that's
is
a
good.
flower room
Bottom.
only.
Wait.
In the
yeah.
bottom corner, they're claiming
Wait.
11.2
I'm ordering mine
days
too.
faster.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean,
Almost
how could
2
you
weeks
argue with
faster.
that number?
It's the point two
See
that
in the
gets
bottom,
me. I'm sold.
bottom right, they're claiming 11.2 days faster to harvest. That's fucking approaching 2 weeks off your harvest. Yeah, right. Everybody would be running these lights.
Well, I mean, there's
They
just
would
no way
deserve
to do that. Yeah.
Do we wanna, like-
we
You're
got to
forgetting
stop
the Super
showing this.
Emerson
Because somebody
effect.
that's
Yes.
watching is going to think that we're like talking about the best new thing in grow
Yeah,
lights. They're going to have like the
this is-
volume turned off. And they're going to be like, oh, wow, they really like
That's-
this ag
Wow,
light.
That's the
not- it is-
example of the worst.
Yeah.
That's the
Attention.
worst example that you can fucking see right there. How can they get away with that?
It's showing that we still
They
have
just get
marketing
away
fraud.
with it, man. It's like, go ahead and sue them. It's probably some, company in China that has no US footprint. And nobody's gonna bother, so they get away with saying any manner of stuff. Don't assume that the stuff that light companies or anybody else for that matter advertises is like run by some sort of censor or something that like makes sure everything they say is valid before they're allowed to publish it. They just come up with all sorts of crazy stuff. It's really up to the consumers to-
bro. It's got lasers.
That's
It's
right.
got lasers.
Shit, yeah.
Just like
And
the
the
white
grounding
papers
cable.
that scientists are putting
You know
out
what I'm
lately,
saying?
though.
So
It's-
this is the Chandra et al. Study, and I just referenced this chart earlier, and it's just kind of nice to actually see it. Here's zero light. So if you're not using a light, you're not going to grow anything. Big facts. So if you want to advertise against zero light, then you're going to have some nice marketable claims. 500 ppfd, 1000 ppfd, 1500 ppfd, where you're seeing like it gradually goes up, and then you see it drop off to that 2000.
Are those lines, Jack, in this year graph, are they different concentrations of CO2 or are those just different cultivars?
This is a flux density, and the other one is net photosynthesis. So how much?
No, the triangle, circle, squares, the different lines that are being plotted there, they represent different data sets. I'm wondering if that is different strains.
Cultivars, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what I was talking about. You
Yeah.
can see like this one, if we're just looking at the square, it goes up, and then it continues to go up. That is the only one that goes up at 2000. You see the
Yeah.
triangle, it drops. You see the other one, they go sideways.
And what is the CO2? This was with 800?
This is using 800 or 750 actually, I think is what they use. But they also do like stuff like temperature, water usage at different rates.
Yeah.
But this paper is really interesting. Earlier I had just the metrics up, but yeah, you can see the different CO2 levels: 250, 350, 450, 550, 650, and 750.
Right.
And then the micromoles and all that good stuff. So this paper, I believe, is just extremely well done. They only use
There's several. So there's a several papers by the Chandra et al. Et al means and others. So there's a research team that Chandra was the lead author on, and they did a number of studies. What's the title on this one? Can you stop at the top? I don't know if I'm looking at the right screen.
photosynthetic response of cannabis sativa L to variations in photosynthetic photon flux densities, temperature, and CO2 conditions.
There's at least 2 or 3 other articles that are potentially harder to come by, but they exist. You can see citations to them.
Here are I got to zoom out just a little bit. We gave the control minus. Okay, so these are just the actual like charts. And you can see at the bottom, variations in stomatal conductance in cannabis sativa and varying photosynthetic flux densities. I think that just means the length of the stems. So under different, like how much they're growing essentially under that light. But then they also examine transpiration rate with different flux densities, and there's 4 of these total. Variations in intercellular CO2 concentrations under the different densities.
That's how we tell when they're getting maxed out, like when they're getting light sensitive, when carbon dioxide starts to become a limiting factor because the amount of it starts to drop within the plant.
Yeah, so that's
the
definitely
intercellular CO2 starts to go down when they hit. Yeah, so yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of showing that there is like that limit, I guess, and it's not able to manage more after that certain point. And then the final one that they show is, at least in this set of 4, is variations in water use based on flux density. So it's interesting, and these are all based on that same lines earlier. Kind of.
So I assume that one that's crashed there. It's been a while. So that one that's crashed is because it shut down, right? The triangle that goes across the top and then plummets in that last reading. So it's shut down due to stress response. It's closed its stomatus and started transpiring less.
Yeah, look at the CO2, like you were saying, it hit its capacity. The triangle is actually one of the worst towards the end. It's at the lowest. So it does have some correspondence, and that would go to what a lot of us have said in the past. And it seems to be a cliche at times, but when people say it's strain dependent, it actually does tend to be strain dependent. And the science is finally coming around to show that to us in one way or another. That being said, there are a really good set of parameters if you keep it within a certain temperature and humidity, certain airflow and CO2 and things like that, good lighting, you're going to have good results for most plants across the board, but you can dial it in a little more of this, a little less of that, things like that across the board. But I know we're at the 15-minute mark now, 14 minutes till we're done with the show. And Spartan Grown usually jumps out about this time. So I want to pass it to Spartan and say thank you for joining us as always. And final thoughts and shout outs for the week.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for our guest today too, Macky and Monkey. It's good to see you guys again. Good to talk to you again.
Always, man. It's good to hear from you. You come on the show soon. I've been trying to hustle you. I've got it marked in my calendar to message you on like in a few days. It comes up soon.
Okay.
I know you're busy, but when you're free, you know, no pressure, bro.
Yeah, don't worry. I've got a little.
Sorry, I interrupted.
Sorry. Don't worry, man. I got a long night ahead of me still. But shout out to you guys, man. It was good to hang with you guys for a while.
Thanks, man.
Of course, I'll be on your show. So yeah, just hit me up for sure. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the chat, man. You guys were rocking today. There was a little intrigue in chat today. It was a little funny, entertaining, and shout out to all you guys anyway that come back every day. Like I said, you know, this is my shit. This is my beginning. This is my genesis, and I hope to be here for as long as the show will go. So I appreciate seeing the same faces in chat and especially on the panel. And so shout out to all you guys. And cheers. Oh, I do want to shout out one thing. In just the state, is a little selfish, but in the state of Michigan, there's going to be another lobby day organized for Thursday, where we're going to get together with I believe it's meeting at the best thing to do is to get a hold of the Michigan Weedsters through Facebook or Instagram, join them, and they're really good. Communication is how I mean, they fucking communicate with me so well that it keeps me informed. So I got to shout them out. Just follow them, and they post a lot of information on there. But anyhow, it's going to be up in Lansing if anybody's free. I appreciate you come out if you're a caregiver or a patient, especially patients are the best, and just be advocates for the plant. And we're going to talk because they're trying to push those same bills that died at the end of the session. They're trying to bring them back in. In fact, the what do they call him, president or whatever it is of the MCMA, Steve Linder, even was on comment on a podcast saying that he's not retiring. He was going to retire, but he's not retiring until he pushes these bills through. So we're going to just show them what Michigan's about. So it's just anyone that wants to come out, will be more than happy to have you with us. And they usually have printouts with key points to talk with. So if you draw a blank, you can just look down and read something to them, or just fucking hand it to a lawmaker, and anything helps. So when you show up in person, it really makes an impression. So thank you for that, and Growers Love, and catch me on the Michigan Growers Grow Show. I'm coming up in about 10 minutes.
Grower Love, Spartan.
Growers Love, guys.
Out, Spartan.
Speak soon, bro.
See you next week, man.
All right,
Great
Spartan.
having you in. thank you for always staying diligent on all that stuff. For anybody out there who's listening, if you're in Michigan, definitely heed Spartan's advice. Linder is a dirtbag, and he's been pushing some terrible cannabis legislation that will make things a lot worse for everybody in the state of Michigan and potentially in other states. That stuff has carryover effects. So keep your eyes and ears open. Be as active as you can if you want to support cannabis.
Brandon made a post on IG about something happening in Oklahoma that hopefully will get passed, right, Brandon?
Yes, 818, 819. We're going to be able to move forward to get it, start sending signatures to get it on the ballot. And that law is different from any other laws because any of the other laws that have been passed for cannabis beforehand, it doesn't matter because these would be written into the state's constitution. And so they override any of the legislation. So we'd be able to get rid of metric and, preserve our constitutional rights. And it's such a good, there's such good bills for small businesses out here.
Get rid of metric?
Yeah, gonna get
not the metric system, Mackey. Not that metric. We've already gotten rid of metric here in America. We use pounds and ounces. We don't use kilograms and grams. And
it gets so confusing, man. It gets so confusing.
As far as weights and measures go, I'm all on board with metric. It just makes life simpler when it comes to math. But we're talking about seed to sale, track and trace. What would happen is the state would be forced to reopen the bid, and also it says that it would be no more stringent than the federal guidelines for hemp. This is the way that part of that bill is written out. So we wouldn't have to have plastic plant tags or any of that bullshit.
Yeah, that metric is the tracing system that most commercial operations use in the United States, and it's just a huge pain in the ass. So it's not the metric system of weights and measures.
Like Brandon has mentioned in the past, before they were fighting it in Oklahoma, it's because it's not an Oklahoma organization. It's a multi-state, probably multinational at this point, organization who requires that on top of the growers, but also the distribution, and which means like the people,
everybody, they all have to tag their products, they create waste, and then the money doesn't even stay in the goes out to Florida because that's where they're based out of.
Yep. So it's a few individuals in that company making a bunch of money off of. Here's the worst part is, like, in theory, you guys could reuse your tags. It's a piece of plastic with like a little sticker on it. You could, in theory, reach out to Metric and say, hey, let's get some new numbers for those tags. We'll print out just the sticker to put on the actual plastic thing that you loop around the plant. But no, they make you take those, keep them for like years, store them, and then buy new ones every single run. So like we're talking about some of these facilities have thousands of plants, and now we're talking about like several grows. We're going to have millions of plastic tags that are single use, non-reusable.
Whose idea was that, man? Who's got a friend in the government that owns a plastic
someone at Metric
factory?
Yeah, somebody owns a plastic.
Someone who
for
got
sure.
it legalized so that they could, grease the palm of the other individual. Most of the legalization pushers were big businesses who wanted to only have 5 permits. Like Florida had like 10 permits for the whole state, and so they were paying like $22 million to get a license to have a dispensary, and they didn't want the small guy, didn't want mom and pop. They want to be able to collect taxes from a big 5 people and say screw you to everybody else. And that's why we have to be make sure that the legislations don't pass. Like the first 5 or 6 legalizations in California didn't pass, and several of them I think were because greed, and the people who actually wanted cannabis to pass didn't want the greed to take over. But it's hard to fight.
Hey, Mackey, what part of the UK are you from?
In the Midlands. Like in the middle, really. I'm the furthest.
It's still illegal over there, Matthew. Just as a heads up, so they aren't.
I can't tell you that, bro.
My address is 69 420.
I'm in England. It actually is that on our mailing list, bro.
Got him.
Well,
shit.
Got him.
Doxed.
Shit, it's found me out. Shit. Sorry, why'd you ask, man?
I was trying to place your accent.
Oh, it's Australian accent. I put an Australian accent on just to make sure nobody knows.
It's a voice changer, really. That's not really
Clever.
his accent.
That is clever. That's very good.
And these bastards troll me sometimes for the slight Australian accent I apparently have, but I don't hear it. I think I sound
kind of
completely
hear
normal.
the drawl, but maybe you just suggested it for me.
Yeah, no, you hear it now, pointed it out. Yeah.
It's just when we have interview guests and I asked him what part of Australia he's from, it's like, oh, we love that.
Oh,
That's great.
Oh, shit. Good fun.
Well, that said, we've got about 5 minutes left, and there is a decent sized panel. So I'm going to go ahead and start passing it around, starting first with Dr. MJ for final thoughts and shout out.
Hey guys, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for our guests, Macky and Monkey, for coming on. We got into a lot of fun lighting talk. I hope that was enlightening for everybody. It was certainly enjoyable. I love it when we get into light talk. Anyways, I'm Dr. MJ Coco from Coco for Cannabis. I do a lot of grow light testing. That's all published on my YouTube channel. And yeah, I'm happy to be here again. We were off last week, so it's nice to sort of get back into the rhythm of doing a show. This was a lot of fun, so I look forward to next week again. And thanks to the chat. Thanks to you, Jack, for hosting every week, the rest of the panel. Grow love, everyone.
Thanks again for
Take
joining,
care.
Doc.
See you
Great to have
later.
you back.
Cheers,
Good to
Doc.
be back.
Later, Doc.
And next up, I'll pass it over to Matthew.
I have to say this is one of my favorite episodes we've had in a long time. Not only because there was some excellent excellent commentary in the chat, very funny jokes from multiple people, and we also got to sort of address something that was pretty hilarious. So to be honest, that was of course very funny. For those who want to learn more about, and I want to say this up front, even though we were looking at some things that seemed like they made crazy confident claims and things that were odd, don't take my word for it or anyone else on the panel's word for it, for that matter, except for Tao, because he's never wrong. But everyone else, just look for resources, look for sources, try to corroborate even what I say. Don't take it at face value. And in that spirit, you can come across my information on YouTube channel Zenthanol, as well as my Instagram at sync, as in synchronize, angel as in angel, sync angel. I post a ton of research reports and other educational information about pests and plant resistance and plant health and that kind of a thing. So you can check that out if you're dealing with pests or want to prevent them in the future.
Always a pleasure having you. Appreciate the valuable information that you share, and I do agree that this has been one of my favorite episodes. It's great being back and having awesome guests. That being said, next up, Noah the Grower.
Yeah, I'm Noah the Grower with 2 E's on Instagram. You can find me there. Most weeks here with everybody else. It was a good show. Yeah, thanks again, Jack, for hosting. And yeah, I'll see everybody next week. If you got any questions, you can find me there on Instagram. Later.
Cheers, Noah. Thank you so much for joining us again. And if you're in the chat, you might be noticing some wrenches being added next to some names. A lot of the regular listeners I like to reward with that moderator. So if you ever do see spam or unwanted content, I guess sometimes we haven't seen it, at least tonight, from like bots and things like that, you can always feel free to hide that user from the chat and delete those messages. Or if there's, I don't know, we don't tend to get like hateful comments or any negativity in the chat. I think we're pretty open and have good discussions, but I trust everybody there who has the wrench. If you feel like you need to remove comments, feel free to do so whenever you feel justified, and we can always see what is removed or whatever. But that being said, it's mostly a positive thing, just showing acknowledgement to some of these great people who've been regulars, listen for a long time, and saying thank you to you. And with that said, I want to pass it next to Kyle Breeder.
You appreciate you doing what you do. You've been doing it for a while now, and you've been doing a great job at it. Appreciate everyone that's here in the panel, still doing it. Appreciate the guests. I appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity to just kind of help some people. I hope some of the information I gave was good. And I'm currently trying to integrate something on my website so I can accept credit cards, which is a humongous feat in regards of cannabis companies. And so I'll have access to that on my website I have a new drop coming in about a week and some change. The Wake and Bake line, which I'm pretty excited about, all really good material that I use for that. And the progeny came out really good. But so yeah, that's happening. And some other things are cool. Anywho, but yeah, I appreciate you guys. I love all y'all, and I'll see you guys Sunday.
Good having you as always, Kyle. And I know. Oh, sorry, my GPS started just yelling at me. Getting directions for going to dinner tonight with a friend, but that doesn't need to be included in the podcast there, of course. But next up, we got Russ Brandon.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Always good to be back. It's been a little bit. I've been pretty swamped with everything, but we are working extra diligently at Bokashi Earthworks to scale everything, get everything all finalized with labeling and et cetera, et cetera. So soil is going to be coming down the pipeline. There's always genetics on there. And I'll have some new drops coming soon, some lime and starfighter stuff. So yeah, keep a lookout, and I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks again for joining us, Brandon, and definitely check out his stuff at Bokashi Earthworks. Keep your eyes open. Those drops tend to not last more than a couple days, so if you're wanting to get something before it sells out, you got to act fast and keep your eyes on Brandon's pages, and that's the best way to get access to that. And last and certainly not least, from our regular panelist, the American one.
Jack, thanks again for hosting as usual. Always excellent job. And Zentanol, good distinction there when you were speaking earlier. I like that. Shout out to everyone in chat. Yo, Monkey and Macky, always good to hear some different accents.
We want you on the show as well. We've been watching you, American One. Join us.
Yes, I'll come hang with you guys anytime.
Sweet, man.
And,
That'd be cool. We'll organize something.
Great. Yeah, definitely. And we love the Australian / English accent too.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Very good. Anyways, yeah, it's always good to be here. And yeah, you know what? I'll just leave it at that today. Peace out, everybody.
Thanks for coming, Tao. Always a pleasure to have you. And next up, our first guest of the evening, Macky from Percy's Growroom.
Yeah, so cheers, man. It's been good. It's been good to come and sit and chat with everybody. Always loads of good information on the Cheap Home Grow Show. Always. So I am Macky from percysgrowroom.com. That's a cannabis growers forum for new growers mainly, but we like experienced growers to come over and help the new guys learn how to grow as well. You know, just because you're experienced doesn't mean that you don't belong at Percy's. All personal growers belong at Percy's. So head over there. We also have a podcast which you can find on all major podcast networks, which is High on Homegrown. And we are also on YouTube at youtube.com/High on Homegrown. And we have a show every Sunday as well, 2 hours before Cheap Home Grow starts. And it's only 2 hours long. So if you watch us first and you watch Cheap Home Grow after, then there's like 4 hours of good content, right? Join us.
Powerful lineups. Good stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, some good interviews as well. Check out the interviews we've had. We've had loads of cool people. And I got most of you guys from the panel now too.
And not just the panelists, but I also got to vouch for Tommy Chong. I know he's a celebrity. Everybody loves him, but I had the pleasure of meeting him in Lowell Cafe a couple years ago, and he's super cool, like exactly who to expect him to be. Down to earth, big time cannabis advocate, and long time just awesome individual. Made tons of great movies and music and entertainment. So check out his interviews on High on Homegrown. And
you tell us all about that story as well.
Yeah, it's a good time, and that should be coming out soon. I know we did it like privately for just the Patreons, I think, over there at first, but it'll be coming out in a little bit. And
so it should be either. I think we got a gorilla growing episode that needs to go out this week, the interview, and I think yours will follow the week after that. So it's next week on Wednesdays the interview goes out.
Cool, no rush. Well,
I'll drop you a link when it's ready, mate.
Definitely different than when we do it live and post it the same night. There might be a little delay. Like I said, I've got a little dinner tonight with a close friend, and it depends on how long this takes to download the video and then upload it to the podcast. So it'll either be up in a little bit or several hours later tonight, but it'll definitely be up by tomorrow. And last and certainly not least, we got Monkey. So
gentlemen, everybody in the panel and everybody in the chat, it's been an honor to be here tonight. It was good to have a laugh about a grow light that we all thought was pretty ridiculous. I mean,
I've already bought it. Don't say shit now. It's on the way.
Man.
What the?
Yeah, I already ordered it.
I thought it was on the screen for so long. I thought, I thought everyone was loving it. Shit.
Be sure to give us a full report.
I'll let you know.
Really, Macky. I want to hear about that one when it comes out. But
freaking laser beams.
The lasers. It's got a laser beam. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's kind of what we do at High on Homegrown. We like to have a little bit of fun, though. But anyway, come check us out over at Percy's. We are a grow forum, unlike any other you'll find. We do not have trolls. I guarantee you 100% because that's against the rules.
Just me.
Macky's our troll. So if you can handle our Australian troll, you can handle anything. But it's been a pleasure being here today, everybody. And by all means, come join us on High on Homegrown one day, everybody.
With that said, this is Jack Greenstock. You can find me on Instagram at just like is behind me on the logo, or Jack_Greenstock on Twitter. 50strains.com if you want a copy of the book 50 Strains of Green. And thank you everybody for coming. This was a great time. really enjoy having new people on the podcast or having people back on the podcast from a long time ago, and just building out the community and getting people to interact with new sets of people that they haven't got to yet. So really appreciate everybody and their time tonight, and all the listeners live on YouTube and the people on the podcast afterwards. Jack Greenstock signing out. Catch you all next week.
Thanks for having us, bro.